Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Splash Page. I'm Sean, and as always, I'm joined by Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
Doing great, Sean. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. And you know what we're here to do today?
Yes, we're going outer space.
We are going to outer space. What we're doing is we are recapping each one of the first season of Invincible episodes very quickly so that this way you just have to watch our videos to be fully caught up by the time season 2 drops. So, with that said, today we're going to be talking about episode 4 entitled Neil Armstrong, Eat Your Heart Out.
A truck drives through a dark night in the sand. The driver gets out, squishing a scorpion, and a man with a tattoo on his hand lights a cigarette. He's leading an expedition into a recently uncovered pyramid. After dressing down the men working there, he enters, holding either a glow stick or possibly a block of uranium, and approaches the burial site of an ancient creature, calling it Master. Using only his hand and possibly the power of uranium, he opens the sarcophagus and unleashes a mummy named Kahor. The winds pick up and the door to the pyramid slams down on him, trapping him and his new mummy master inside.
Meanwhile, Omni-Man and Invincible fly over that same desert and work on more training, like how not to turn the entire desert into a dust storm. They race each other to Mount Everest and surprise the climbers, and then we get the title card. 4 minutes and 33 seconds in, and very, very bloody. Mark and Nolan discuss their protection of Earth and the innumerable other planets via the Viltrumite World Betterment Committee, and how the death of Nolan's parents drove him to start life anew on Earth. Nolan hammers in the idea of sacrifice to keep the universe safe. They then jet off home.
We find ourselves at the home of Olga, the wife of Red Rush. Olga and Debbie discuss the deaths of the Guardians. Olga's pretty confident that the government is lying about looking into the situation. When Debbie asks if Red Rush ever lied to her, Olga says yes, all the time. But the only time she ever believed him was when he told her that everything was going to be fine.
Back at her own home, Debbie pours herself a glass of wine and starts to do some digging into Damien Darkblood, Demon Detective, who is trying to save his own soul by shedding light onto the truth. She shuts down her browser quickly as she hears Mark and Nolan land on the front porch.
After unsuccessfully prying Mark to discuss his date later that night with Amber, Debbie lets Nolan know about Olga's suspicions. Nolan does his best to gaslight Debbie, bringing up Olga's drinking problems.
Mark and Amber spend some time on a date in an outdoor market. Amber tries to connect with Mark while he tries to figure out how to both impress her while also not exposing the fact that he is also secretly a superhero.
Damien Darkblood sits alone in his film noir office, drinking, I'm gonna guess, scotch, when Nolan shows up behind him and they have a discussion, accusing each other not so subtly of killing the Guardians. Nolan threatens Darkblood and jets out of the office. Things are a little tense between these two.
The last remaining Mauler twin finds a secret hideout in an abandoned garage of some sort and gets to work creating his new clone of himself, which seems to be a process of half science and half hamburger meat.
The new Guardians take over the secret lair of the old ones. Rex and Samson are still at odds. Cecil teleports in to lay down the law. Rex notices the splotch of blood left on the wall, and Cecil claims he left it there on purpose to remind them of what happened, and that it'll only get washed away when they prove themselves worthy. Rex and Monster Girl make up for their fight earlier at the superhero tryouts, and Robot tries to make sure Rex doesn't sleep with any more of their teammates, then pinches Rex's shoulder with a needle, secretly drawing blood for what I'm sure will be a perfectly innocent reason.
Debbie's home on her laptop late at night. Nolan tries to flirt with his wife, but she's not having it. She's fed up with him thinking of her as just his wife, and they get into a fight. Until Nolan shushes her and then strangles Cecil, who apparently just popped into the kitchen with his teleporter.
Mark and Amber finish their date, which seems to have gone well. He drops her off at the door, then flies home ecstatic, only to find Cecil explaining that he wants Omni-Man to shadow the first manned mission to Mars to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Nolan doesn't want to go, mostly because he's suspicious that Cecil wants him off the planet. Just like the last time a threat from space showed up, Mark volunteers. Debbie gives him the "you need to decide what kind of hero you want to be" speech, and Cecil teleports him out of his safe house across the street, where he admits that he did want to get Nolan off the planet so that they could investigate him for the murders of the Guardians, but sending Mark, I guess, could work too.
Minutes to take off to Mars, Mark shows up at Amber's door and drops off a giant expensive gift and then tells her, well, doesn't tell her that he's invincible, but he does tell her that he's going to be away for the next 2 weeks. He then runs off, catches up to the space shuttle.
Cecil reminds Mark that there are indeed Martians in the world, and he should keep an eye out for them, and to make sure the astronauts get home safe.
Debbie and Nolan are arguing about Mark going to space. Debbie accuses Nolan of acting differently. He's become distant and mean. He blames it on the stress of having a family and being terrified of losing their son. Nolan takes his wife on a date to a restaurant in Rome where they had their first date. Nolan comes clean about Cecil trying to pin the murders of the Guardians on him and calmly asks Debbie to trust him while a giant dragon tears apart Rome. He sits back, relaxed. He's on vacation.
Mark learns he can't eat a sandwich in space. He lands on Mars and sets up camp at the landing point as the astronauts go off to do whatever it is they were planning on doing there. He promptly falls asleep, only to find that his astronauts have disappeared and follows the trail of footprints leading away from the shuttle.
Darkblood makes another visit to the Graysons' household to snoop around while Nolan and Debbie are in Rome. Downstairs, he runs into Cecil and his invisible soldiers.
Mark follows the footprints to a point in the middle of the desert where they just kind of stop. He finds a trapdoor and is attacked by a squid-like creature called a sequid. He passes by dozens of these creatures as he walks through the tunnels of Mars until he comes across the actual Martians, who are surprised the sequids can't attach themselves to him. They bring him to the Martian Emperor, where they have been holding the astronauts.
We find out that sequids have the ability to grab on to many life forms. However, they are unable to do that to the Martians because the Martians are shapeshifters. The sequids are also unable to connect themselves to Invincible because he is too strong as a Viltrumite. The Martian Emperor explains how the sequids could potentially take over Mars by fusing with a human, creating a hive mind, and then having the ability to run over the planet, and then eventually come to Earth as well. He's going to execute the humans to make sure they don't come in contact with any sequids. So Mark and the astronauts run for their lives, barely escaping Mars with the help of a dust cloud created by Mark. That's what they call a callback.
Turns out the Martian's greatest fear actually did come to be, and one sequid took over one of the astronauts' bodies, leaving him there to annihilate the Martian Empire. And one shape-shifting sequid took his place on the spaceship and headed back to Earth.
Back at school, Mark talks around the detail of his trip to Mars with Amber and gives her a rock from Mars, telling her it's a regular Earth rock because Mark is incredibly bad at lying.
Cecil brings Darkblood into the GDA and lets him know he agrees with Darkblood that Nolan did indeed probably kill the Guardians, but he can't have Darkblood running around blabbing about it to everyone else, so he sends him back to hell.
Debbie stages Olga's house for sale and finds a couple of buyers.
Meanwhile, Robot shows up to give the blood he's drawn from Rex to a hideously disfigured baby living in a mason jar.
Back at the Graysons' home, Debbie grabs something from her closet, just missing a notebook left there by Damien Darkblood. Now Nolan brags about how Cecil's apologized to him for thinking he's killed the Guardians. Well, that's it for episode 4. Thank you guys so much for watching. On the screen now should be a link to the next video, which will be episode 5. So please click that, and please like and subscribe our channel. We would really, really appreciate it. Well, that's it from us. I'm Sean. That's Andrew. Take it easy, YouTube.
See you next time.